Welcome to Learn at Work podcast, which is sponsored by iOS Press, the publisher of Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. We're delighted to host this podcast that will bring together insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions on topics that matter most in the realm of health, rehabilitation, work, prevention, and assessment. What can you expect from our podcast? We'll have expert interviews, individuals who have published in the journal, and we'll dive into conversations with leaders who have shared their valuable experience and expertise. You'll learn about different latest work trends, technology, and best practices. I'm Karen Jacobs, the founding editor of Work, and I'm the moderator of these podcasts. Welcome to this episode of Learn at Work. We're traveling to Belgium, and Christophe is our guest today. Could you introduce yourself? Tell us, again, I said you were in Belgium, but where are you working? And let's go back in time for your career. So welcome.
Okay, thanks for inviting me, Karen. I'm Christophe van Roelen. Indeed, I'm from Belgium, Europe. I'm the director of the Brussels Institute for Social and Population Studies at the Vrije Universiteit Brussel. If you would translate it, it would be like the Free University of Brussels, but it really doesn't sound in English. And that's an interdisciplinary research institute that is really new. We started beginning this year as a merger of other research institutes. We are, in fact, a combination of sociologists, demographers, social epidemiologists, occupational psychologists, labor market economists, and data scientists, which is a very nice combination. And within that group, I'm not only directing the group, but also running a research line on what I would call job quality and workers' health and well-being. And that's pretty much also the story of my career, that subdiscipline between sociology of work, health sociology, and maybe also social epidemiology.
So what was your original degree that
Yeah.
led you to now being the director of this very exciting, would you call it a unit or department?
Yeah, we call it a research group.
Research
Um,
group.
but you can call it a department as well. Yeah. Um, so I'm a master in sociology, and then I did my PhD in the medical faculty, and I obtained a PhD in social health sciences. So that's a bit my background. And from the beginning, I was interested in socioeconomic inequalities in health and well-being, and then more specifically in what work could be as a contribution there. So it's not only the link between work and health-related issues, but also the distributional underlying distributional questions there. Because, well, I think I don't have to convince you that we don't have the same working conditions, and that those working conditions are not distributed at random, but that there are strong social predictors of working conditions.
Yes, and you're in Belgium, I'm in the United States, but it sounds like, wherever we might go in the world, that some of these issues are the same. And maybe you could share some of the issues that your researchers are investigating. And I do want to comment one more time. The interprofessional variety of people's backgrounds, I think, is striking and so important. I'm very impressed with the group of people that you're working with.
Yeah, I'm excited too, because we really um, yeah um, brought those people together in the past years, and it's one of the things I'm proud of, that it worked out now. Um, yeah, so indeed, and I think that it's important to signal this European Belgian background in a way, because I think that, and that's also where my career started as a researcher. We were astonished by the degree of labor market flexibility and inequality in the United States. But by the 2000s, it came to many European countries. And issues like precarious employment, like big inequalities in job quality, with also results on the wages, but also results on the longevity of workers. These were shocking phenomena for continental European researchers. So that's where it all started, and that's also a bit the different research lines in the group. We are looking at precarious employment. I can say a bit more about that later. We are looking at differences between European countries, but also between occupational groups in what we call multi-dimensional job quality. So it's not only wage, but it's also the content of work tasks. It's also the type of contracts people are holding, the exposure to all kinds of harmful factors. We are now really immersed in the study of hybrid work, which is maybe, and that's maybe also something happening very much in the US, a kind of shocking change in our labor market in the past years. I think that we were all talking about robots taking our jobs and artificial intelligence, but maybe the most shocking thing that happened is that people start to work from home on a massive scale. So that's one of the research lines. And also, freelancing, platform economy, student work, and how these like more peripheral groups on the labor market get in touch with the benefits, but also the harmful aspects of their working life. That I think it's a summary of what we are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I listened to you, and I was taking notes because so many of these areas, I think many people don't understand. And maybe could you explain to our listeners what precarious work is?
Yes. So I started this research in 2009, 2008 when I was finishing my PhD, and I was very much impressed with the research of the people in Barcelona of the Health Inequalities Research Group of Professor Joan Benac and Carles Muntaner, who is also at the Toronto University. And they approached a factor that is often overseen when you look at occupational health research and also occupational psychological research. That is how the type of contract and the type of employment relationship is, in fact, also a determinant of worker health and well being. And they didn't look at contracts because we have the tendency to be very dichotomous there. Like people have a permanent contract and then they are fine, and people have a kind of very temporary 0 hour contract and then they are worse off. But it's more than that. Precarious employment is a multidimensional concept, and that is what I learned from these very important researchers there. That it's not only the legal type of contract, but also voice that's also important, or the degree of determination on working hours, the extent that your employer is investing in you as a worker for the future, for your career. So the degree of social insecurity and coverage by all kinds of benefits. So, and we made this model, which is the employment precariousness scale, that is in fact saying that people who accumulate of many of these characteristics in a negative way, so that don't have a fixed contract, that have very flexible working hours, that don't get any training, that don't have any social protection, those are the people in precarious employment. And underlying, in fact, is a certain amount of disempowerment, the lack of bargaining power, which is in fact a kind of latent cause. It's not that the contract or the working hours, they are risk factors, but there's something that is unifying this situation, that is explaining why people tend to accumulate these adverse characteristics. And that is what we call precarious employment. To give you just one example from Belgium, Belgium is seen as a very rigid labor market where a lot of people have a stable contract. But we do have precariousness. Precariousness is a problem of people with a permanent employment contract. We see it in domestic cleaning, for example, where I had a few papers on. There you see that these people may have a stable, open-ended contract, but they score very bad on all these other dimensions of precariousness, and it has an influence on their health at the end. So, yeah, I think precariousness is this overarching term to show vulnerability in the labor market, basically.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And this is, you mentioned Belgium, you were in Barcelona where, it's studying there, but it's something that's around the globe
Yeah.
and something that people need to understand because it's really important. I believe we're seeing a growth in this as well.
Yeah, yeah. Although when you look at it in an empirical way, it's of course more nuanced than that. You see tendencies happening everywhere in the world, but in every place it gets manifested in a different way. It can be in the form of very small jobs, underemployment, for example, which is also a type of precariousness, specifically gender type of precariousness. But in some sectors and in some contexts, it's the other way around. It are unregulated, boundaryless jobs where people have no indication when their working day will end. They are very intensive and insecure situations. And now, of course, and that's one of the final of the last papers we had in work, it also stretches towards phenomena like the platform economy or transnational work or posted work, which are relatively new phenomena still, certainly in Europe. And that's another type of precariousness. So it's really mixed how these patterns are distributed in the world.
Well, you gave a great segue into the journal work, a journal of assessment, rehabilitation, and prevention. I'd love you to maybe share some of your experience with publishing with work
Yeah.
and what you've published with our journal.
Well, I looked it up, of course, preparing this conversation. And indeed, there are not so many papers, but still a few, I think 4 to 5. And it started already at the moment that I was finishing my PhD, where we looked at the distribution of these characteristics of employment quality, of precarious employment in Europe. And we made a nice paper together with Vanessa Puig-Baracina on the distribution in Europe based on the working conditions survey of these characteristics. So that's one of the first papers I did for work. And then we had an interesting qualitative study on precariousness in Belgium with Kim Bosmans, really showing the mechanisms linking precarious employment, as I just described it, and mental well-being of workers. Um, we also published a very nice study that was in fact commissioned by Eurofound, the European agency that is looking at quality of work and employment, on the relation between how tasks are defined. Are they autonomous? Do you have a lot of harmful exposures, etc.? And the status in employment you are in, which is something that is often taken for granted. That people with a temporary contract, for example, have worse working conditions than people with a full contract. But there is not so much empirical evidence that is really showing this. So that paper, together with Jessie Gevaert, I think is also a very nice one. And then only a few weeks ago, we got this paper accepted that is trying to translate this employment precariousness scale that is in fact designed for waged employees to those people working in the gig economy. Because, of course, when you look at the gig economy, the digital platforms, all these established notions in work research, they become less evident. What is a contract? What is, in fact, the employment relation between an employer and the client and the platform worker? How do we define the wage? Is that the wage coming from one platform, the wage coming from all the platforms people work for? or is it some compound measure with some other jobs they are doing? So many of these dimensions, they become really hard to operationalize. And that is, I think, the big merit of that last paper, that we tried, maybe one approach among many approaches, to translate this framework to the gig economy. And that was a paper together with Elif van der Venne, who's one of my current PhD students.
Well, it's wonderful that you're working with your PhD students, and those people will be able to, as their career evolves, amplify the work that you're doing. For people who don't know the word gig economy, what is a gig economy? What does that
Yeah.
mean?
So um, if you look at a normal employment relationship, there is a kind of long-term engagement. Might be very long-term, might be a bit lesser than that. But the idea is that you are hired for a year, for more than a year, maybe only for a week, and that you do work for an employer. In the gig economy, this whole notion is blurred because you're only paid for one gig, one task. That might be to bring a meal from restaurant X to client Y, or to um, identify some images in a number of pictures, or to just babysit for 1 hour. So the relation of employment is reduced to a very small, short gig, and often these gigs are traded on digital platforms. In fact, the digitalization of labor brokering made it possible to trade gigs and not employment contracts. So there is a strong relation with this ICT factors that is enabling it, and the piecemeal division of work tasks in very small units.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank you and your colleagues for publishing in Work. And we're we pride ourselves on being an author-friendly journal, so
Yeah,
that you've submitted papers multiple times to us, I think
yeah,
underscores that it's
yeah.
been a good experience for you.
Yeah, that's certainly the case, and I want to stress that. I think Work is one of these journals that I've felt that have been always next to me, by my side, and also I think a high degree of social responsibility that is coming through there, and I valorize that very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love that you said social responsibility, because that is something that we strive for as a global journal, to give authors, researchers, scholars, clinicians a voice to share the work that they're doing. In the last couple of minutes, I love concluding an episode with asking our guests, what's your why? What motivates you?
Yeah. That's a difficult question. I'm happy you asked it a bit beforehand as well. Yeah, I mean, you're a person and you're a professional, of course. And I think as an academic, we always have to balance that relation. So, of course, my why is my family, my children, my leisure activities, etc. But I think that my professional drive is, yeah, some contribution to the big question of justice in the labor market, justice in terms of life chances that people have in their lives. And I think as sociologists, but certainly also other disciplines, there's a big drive in showing that the position people have is not a coincidence, but is determined by many factors, among which factors in work and employment. So I really my drive is really to show the truth and the evidence in terms of the large inequalities that are there in our society. I think I feel it as a duty to contribute to that debate and to make visible how life chances are distributed unequally, and how policies, I think, should play a role in trying to correct and trying to make some kind of redistribution to make society a more just place to be in as a human being. I think that's maybe my most substantial drive to do my research.
Well, it's a beautiful drive, and I admire that. And your voice is very powerful, and you are an advocate. And the people that you're working with, and you as the director of this department, is going to make a difference in the quality of life for people. So I want to thank you for publishing in Work and for being a guest on Learn at Work. And
It
if
was a pleasure.
someone wants to reach out to you, what would be the best way? Is there a website, an
Yeah.
email? What can you
Yeah.
share?
We have a website of the Brispo Research Institute. I could spell it out if you want.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
it's Brispo, Brespo dot research dot vub dot be.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on Learn at Work.
It was a